Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to all our speakers and our participants. Welcome to our COASTAR webinar titled Turning Your Policy Brief into Action. Before we started, allow me to go over some housekeeping rules. So number one is please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. However, you can choose to have your camera on or off. During the presentation, please write in the chat box and let us know if you can't see or hear anything. We will try to help you out. Next, if you are also welcome to use the chat box to ask questions, which will be addressed during the Q&A session. Also, do note that this event will be recorded and be made available to the participants via sharing later this week. Okay, now before we also a little bit of introduction to our project COASTAR, which is short for Empowering Malaysia's Future Leaders in Coastal Ocean Actionable and Sustainable Teaching and Research. This project was funded by British Council and MIT, and a collaboration between University Malaya, Edinburgh Napier University, and UT Stein Malaysia. So this is a fellowship program that aims to empower future Malaysian leaders in coastal sustainability research and to foster new network among early career researchers, academic mentors, and relevant stakeholders in coastal-related studies. So under the mentorship of several outstanding multidisciplinary research from the Edinburgh Napier University, UT Malaya in Stein Malaysia, fellows will engage in a year-long series of empowerment and capacity building training modules. And also, this program will ultimately pioneer the development of a functioning coastal sustainable project that will deliver climate and development benefits. Now, so for today, we focuses on the practical approach of drafting a solid policy brief, from putting together scientific findings and recommendations and turning them into a salient and actionable document. We have Puan Siti Nurbaiyah Nadzmi, who is an Associate Fellow at LESTARI UKM with an extensive knowledge in developing narratives and strategic communications, backed by a 30 years career in journalism, corporate, and government. She has served as Chief Operating Officer with a think tank and press secretary to a science, environment, and climate change minister, and a senior journalist with the National Daily. Her deep understanding in the key stakeholders' engagement and wide experience working with scientific committees have made her a much sought-after advisor for those seeking to turn their research into policy. Now, without further ado, I welcome Puan Nurbaiyah to speak. Puan Nurbaiyah, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your kind introduction. Right. I would like to jump straight into this presentation or this talk today, and I thank all of you who are here. And I promise you, it's going to be a lively discussion. And I hope that everyone will get their questions ready so that we can exchange thoughts and share our experience of building a policy brief. So yes, what is our topic today is turning your policy brief into action. What exactly do I mean by that? So basically, this is where I'd like to share with you the difference between what is a policy brief, what is the actual public policy, and how do you come in as a researcher? So yes, let's begin, Dr. Lee. The first slide, please. Next. So what is a public policy? A public policy can be defined, among others. It is the action or whatever that the government chose to. It is something that is formulated with a certain agenda and goal. It's pretty much a fixed target by either the federal or the state government. Sometimes it has a legal aspect to it. It is made into a law or an enactment, but most of the time it contains SOP, it contains guidelines, regulatory circulars, and others. But a policy brief is something that is written, drafted by researchers whether they belong to institutions or they are academics. And it is a reference for largely the lawmakers, and it contains, it focuses on it, on issues, specific issues, one brief, usually one issue, and it looks at the practical solutions or recommendations based on the findings from their research. So a policy brief is written way ahead in responding to a public policy, either it's a public policy or commenting or complementing the public policy, and it is recommended to the lawmakers. Lawmakers here can be your MPs, member of parliament, or state assembly. State Assembly, ahli Dewan Undangan Negeri. Next slide, please. So a public policy means it actions, decisions, rules, public bodies consisting heads of states and usually politicians, government administrators. They all come together and create a public policy. Yeah. It covers some legal systems, regulatory measures, actions, financing priorities, and all that. So I'd like to just show some of the government policies in Malaysia that you're more familiar with, like Dasar Ekonomi Baru, Dasar Pandang ke Timur, Dasar Penswastaan, Dasar Transformasi Nasional, Wawasan Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama. These are policies. These are agendas by the government. So a policy brief, what is it to a researcher? Is putting your high impact research into fact-based action. This is where, when you're writing a policy brief, that you have to bear in mind that your policy brief must appeal to improve or protect the people or environment. I'm just giving you examples, yeah, to dispel myths, untruths, misinformation from what was believed in a certain situation. And it is also a call card for your consultation, meaning that if you have put together a policy brief with your name on it, then whoever feels that this is good, then you will be the expert to be consulted with, to be reached out to. And by writing a policy brief, you are actually reaching out to a larger circle. It is not just the lawmakers, but the NGOs as well, the civil society, and the people, the communities. Yeah. So it is very important to put together a good policy brief that when you're writing it, when you're designing it, it has in your mind that this policy brief can be turned into action. So policies outline, usually, I'll just talk a bit more about what policies are. Policies outline what a government is going to do. So here it is, like when you're writing a policy brief, you will understand this continuity, that whatever that you write in the policy brief, does it gel with whatever that is being promoted, or what the policy is all about? Or are you trying to improve and make changes? So the policy brief here is largely a recommendation. It's the operative word here, yeah, is recommendation. It has to be very persuasive to recommend change, whether it is to an existing policy or a new policy or a new guideline altogether. Okay. The next slide, please. And why do you write policy briefs, researchers? First, because of the ideals, it improves the livelihood of people. It protects the natural resources. It creates a sustainable economic activities for the communities. It enhances efficiency in natural resources and It enhances the efficiency in natural resources management. It improves safety, security, health of the people, and maybe you'd like to respond to an issue. So if you look at it, you may think that this is idealistic altogether, but as a researcher, your findings, your research is something that benefits the society. What is it that from your finding that benefits the society in all this idealistic situation is something that you need to shout out. So this is where you put it together in a policy brief. Next slide, please. Who reads the policy brief? The lawmakers. Here's the thing about the lawmakers here. They are not, number one, specialists of your field. And therefore, when they read your policy brief, they are looking for something that is concise and succinct. It is loaded with information, but not overloaded. It is specific and not sensational. It is a non-specialist language. It is written in a non-specialist language, meaning that whichever background they are from, they will be able to understand in a quick manner, in single sitting. That's what I mean. So when you're talking with a non-specialist or written in a non-specialist language, certain technical terms must be explained. It has to be written in an easy to grasp manner, meaning that it has to be visually arresting, that at a glance, at a sitting, whoever is reading it, the lawmakers, they can understand immediately. It leaps to their eye. What is it that if you're using, for instance, infographics or pictures or photographs, it has to be complementing to your suggestion in the policy brief. So a good layout, the bullet forms and the paragraphing, they have to be there to help people to read, the lawmakers to read in a single reading. They can grasp it. Okay. And the recommendations, this is another thing that's what their eye will be drawn to immediately. The recommendations has to be very clear because your policy brief is their reference and their problem solving tool. If the policy brief drowns the reference, the problem, the solutions or the recommendations elsewhere, or it is not clearly spelled out, then it will take time for them to actually look out for it, and you don't want them to miss out your recommendation. So the policy brief has to have all these items jump out from the page very clearly to them. Okay. Next slide, please. How does the lawmaker reads a policy brief? Okay, how does a lawmaker becomes a lawmaker? So a lawmaker is usually the wakil rakyat, whether it is a wakil rakyat at the state assembly, ADUN, or it is at the parliament. How did they become policymakers? They become policymakers by being voted in. So you have to understand, the first that will come to their mind is, how will this brief help the taxpayers? How will this be popular? How will this brief be popular with the voters? How will it generate the economy for the constituents? These thoughts, these questions are always on top of their minds. If your policy brief addresses or clearly spelled out that this is how these research findings or how these suggestions will help with the constituents, with the taxpayers, or with the economic activities, generate income for the people, it will grab the lawmakers' attention. And this is what you want to do. Once you have grabbed their attention, then they will look deeper at what is it that you're trying to say in your policy brief. Okay. So it is, I think, from the very beginning, when you put your thoughts to your writing a policy brief, it has to be geared towards in a way that whether or not this will attract the policymakers. And if you feel like it doesn't really gel, then look deeper at how they will be interested. Because whatever it is, in their capacity as a lawmaker, they are serving the people. Ideally, they are serving the people, and they would like to know whether or not these changes are meant for the people who can benefit from these changes that they are about to make, right? So the next slide, please. What should be included in policy briefs? Okay. Number one, it must state the problem. You must highlight the problem and the communities, not just the problem, but communities or areas affected. What are the red flags? This is different coming from a researcher, probably, and coming from a lawmakers. How they see it is a problem is different from how you see it is a problem. So stating your problem statement is very important, that you understand that their priority is what the voters, whether or not the voters will benefit from this. So it is always important to look or draft your problem statement according to what they think is important. Not they think is important, meaning according to what is important to the people. If it doesn't affect the people, if it doesn't affect the voters, then probably the lawmakers would not be as interested. And your policy brief must have a call for action. Again, this is something that you have to be attuned to as how a lawmakers understand that what is a good call for action and what is not. But when you put forward responding to an issue, something that they would have to be interested in, by connecting it to specific policies and law or enactment, and you have to justify the change, then they will be able to see these are the key elements that they need to look at. If they don't look at this will be a kind of persuasion, or for the lawmakers, they will see this as something that they need to pay attention to. And solutions. When you have the problem statement, you have call for action, and then you have the solutions there. Solutions, you have to spell out what is a better implementation and benefits to the people and environment. This has to be spelled out succinctly and concisely, because by getting them, your policy brief is to get them on board, to make the change. So the solutions are critical. In writing a policy brief, when you have um, uh, um, a solution that is appealing to the lawmakers, then you are already halfway there. Next slide, please. Right. So once you have all that written down, what is next? This is where you need to put it into action. Okay. So hang on a minute. Yeah, let me look at my notes. But before we go further, I'd like to emphasize that the key function of the policy issue paper, it has to provide a comprehensive and persuasive argument. So I'd like everybody to pay attention to this word, persuasive. Why is it persuasive? Because you are promoting change. You are getting the buy-in from the lawmakers. So if one lawmaker actually read your policy brief, this lawmaker has to convince other lawmakers to agree and to come on board. The better, the clearer you write on the policy paper on certain issues and how it impacts or benefits the people, the better it is. It can be explained or the information can be disseminated without misunderstanding. So here it is, be very clear that it is not an academic writing in such that you are disseminating information or fact finding or results of a finding, but a policy brief, the whole document is about gearing for change. So this is something that that needs a bit of change of mindset when you're writing it. Or I wouldn't say it, sorry, not change of mindset, it's more of a change of approach. How do you approach this subject is by understanding, policy brief writing, yeah, is understanding that whoever is reading it, how would they take it further? If you have managed to persuade this person for a change, how do this lawmaker engage with other lawmakers and persuade them to actually come on board and agree on this change? So it is not just one person, it is a whole lot of the entire day one and the entire parliament, yeah, to be able to understand that this is something that the people need. Right, next slide, please. Who are the actors? Now, first, you have to identify. Now that you have written a great policy brief, you have to look at who are the actors. Before we go further, I also have to highlight this. The slide before this, I mentioned that you need to understand which law or which policy that you are responding to. So it is also very important that if it is if it is an enactment and the state, whether it's a state matter or it's a federal matter. So do your research on which specific law or specific policies that you are working on or affecting or getting responding to. So once you understand that, then it is easier to identify who are the actors, who are the lawmakers, administrators, or society that you need to meet with this document. If it is state matter, then Ahli Dewan Undangan Negeri is the right person that you should meet. The state exco, under which this issue that you're writing on or focusing on, which state exco is looking after it, is in charge. And then you have SS is state secretary, Setiausaha Kerajaan Negeri. So these people are the actors of who has the power to make the changes. And then in the brown box, you will see at the federal level, yeah, federal government level, the gray box is for the state government. So the brown box is for federal government. So federal government policymakers are usually the members of parliament. So understand if this area is affecting a specific, say for instance, it is Hulu Selangor, for instance, so you go and look for MP for Hulu Selangor. If it is an issue in Port Klang, for instance, then you go and look for MP at Port Klang for Klang. Yeah, Klang is a bit difficult. It has two areas, so you have to know which MP is immediately, which constituents is immediately affected and look for the MP. Yeah. And then Parliament is interesting because it has Parliament Select Committee. Check on the Parliament website. You will see there is a Parliament Select Committee who actually, uh, eh, who- this committee, yeah, it's non-partisan. So you can meet them, organize to meet meeting with them and present your brief. So they will look based on issues. So there are different committees. Have a look at which issue that is relevant to which select committee there is at Parliament. And then at the ministry level, you can also approach the Ketua Setiausaha Kementerian. You can also approach the Ketua as a state secretary and Ketua Setiausaha Kementerian is usually the administrators. So it depends again when it comes to what is it that you are proposing in your paper, whether it is a change of policy, whether it is a change of regulations, law, and all this. These are the actors that you should meet and present your ideas. Sometimes you don't need to meet everybody, but sometimes here where we need to look at the blue box, the communities. Maybe you should talk to the people first and see how they can push this agenda towards their community leaders or the civil society. That is also good. And sometimes they can carry this policy brief further. Yeah. Next slide, please. So this is a flow, a 9-step of getting your policy brief out there. First, you have to draft a purposeful email. I know this sounds like a very basic, but a lot of emails does not state, in my experience, a lot of emails does not state what is it that you wanted out of the meeting. So you have to brief, you have to draft a good email stating what is it that you want out of this meeting. You have to be very tactful, you have to be very diplomatic, and you have to be very persuasive from the very first step. And then from there on, email, follow up with a letter, you get an appointment with the actors that you wanted to meet. Yeah. And then from the appointment, you need to prep a persuasive presentation. This is critical for you to move forward. Why do I say that? Because in my experience working with the ministry, I have seen so many presentations that is just too long and dragging that when you sit through, you don't know, you lose here. What is the most important point? What are the salient points that you need to put forward? Because there's just too many things being presented. So prep a persuasive presentation, test it out, make sure that you are presenting something that can change the mind of a person to take on, to get the buy-in of whatever that you are presenting, whatever that is in your policy brief. So your presentation is critical. Then when you meet the actors, again, the word persuasive here. When you meet the actors, you do your presentation, make sure that you close the meeting with some kind of follow-up for you to follow up, some kind of understanding. What is it that's not being met, or what is it that they can work further together? A collaboration is always wonderful. So be very clear from the very beginning during your presentation that what is it that you need out of this meeting. And then you close it with a positive note. Closing the meeting means that you get this buy-in there and then, whether or not they would like a follow-up from this meeting, whether or not they agree, what is it they wanted, what is it that they disagree with. So from there, you get a kind of feedback to move forward, whether or not you need to move to another actor, you need to work with the KSU, you need to work with the state secretary, close the meeting with another appointment. This is where you need to close the deal. So very important that you plan this. Then, of course, after the meeting, you send a thank you email and then you do a follow-up. This is critical. This is where you understand whether or not whatever that you've said during the presentation, whatever you've said at the meeting is you have gotten the buy-in or not. So from the follow-up, if it is all positive, you need to build the rapport. Do not leave it hanging. Build the rapport and keep with the updates. The follow-up, the rapport building, the updates are critical to see how far your policy brief will travel. And perhaps maybe the first policy paper is not getting through, but maybe your second paper, your third paper, it will get noticed. So this is very, very important to have that kind of rapport with the administrators and the lawmakers. Yeah. Next slide, please. So I get this question a lot, actually. Do I need to go to the media? Whether or not you'd like to engage with the media depends on your institution, depends on your grant, whether or not you can go to the press. You can make public of your findings, of your policy brief, of the publication of your policy brief. If you do, if it's okay for you to and you'd like to engage with the media, so there are a few options that you can make. First, you can draft a press statements of your findings or your policy brief in responding to an issue. And if it is something that is contemporary, for instance, you are writing a policy brief on water conservation, and suddenly there's a pollution issue. So definitely your press statement will get massive coverage, and you would like to leverage on a situation like that. Then if you are not so much into press statements, what you can do is write an opinion editorial or letters to the editor to put forward your findings or your policy brief. This is also, I think, this is a more manageable press engagement because putting or sending an article to the newspaper is not as daunting as making a press statement. Yeah, but op-ed will travel slightly slower and it's not as sensational as making a press statement. You can also make a press statement by engaging with the lawmaker and asking the lawmaker to make the press statement. That can also be done. Yeah. Interviews, by granting interviews, you as an expert in the field can always give interviews to the press. How you can do this if you have a good rapport, or you can inform the press that you have this issue and you'd like to talk about it. But interviews, unless you are very famous, usually the press wouldn't really come to you and do interviews. So interviews can be a bit difficult to get. But if you are already familiar with with the press, if you're already a contact, then it'll be very easy for them to get comments from you. So don't be too scared with the media, actually. Make friends with them. And then public forums. Go on public forums. You do not keep your policy paper or policy briefs in just lying about gathering dust, but you need to go out in public forums. You can go on digital TV. There's so many platforms out there. You can do podcast interview and you can do webinars. And this is where you push forward what is it that you have written and your findings as well. And then social media. I am not so sure whether or not you are allowed to do TikTok or YouTube content. But if you can, social media is one of the best. Creating digital content can be time consuming, but it will travel far and wide if you have the right content. Okay, of course, there is a risk that um, it can go both ways, yeah. So you have to be careful as well. And then that's website. I think this is one of the best channel, and I would suggest that you have a website working on whichever issue that that you have, that you're working, you're responding to. So a website by blogging is very, very good. You can either use again FB as your blog, or you can create a WordPress. It's free, and this is important that you put forward your thinking, push it out there on the website. If your institution has its own website, then they should highlight these policy briefs on their website. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, I think we've come to the end, and I would like to pass the mic back to our MC. Yeah, Dr. Lee, thank you very much.
Hi, Puan Nurbaiyah. Thank you for that very
Hi.
interesting and stimulating talk there. So I'm not Dr. Lee, okay?
Okay. Hi, Amin.
Hi, Puan Nurbaiyah. Lovely to have you back here together with us. And, once again, a very interesting talk. And, we already have a number of questions lined up for you, Puan Nurbaiyah. So get ready to be grilled. So I think that, you've given some really short, concise recommendations and suggestions. So kind of like a lot of the questions are just kind of expanding from there. So we have one question from, I'm sorry, I can't tell if you are doctors or Miss or Mrs. So my apologies if I'm not addressing you correctly, but I'm going to assume that everyone is doctor here, okay, just to be safe. So we have Dr. Nur Hasimad asking the question of, should the policy recommendations be of long-term, medium-term, or short-term solutions? Which one is preferable and gets more attention from policymakers?
Of course,
Maybe
the short term.
yeah.
Of course, the short term. I can say that because again, this sounded very, very how do I put this here? Very naughty, because we have elections every 5 years.
Right.
So that's a situation. Every lawmakers have 5 years, and in the past we have seen how we have changed within less than 4 years, 3 times. Yeah, the government has changed for 3 times, and this is why it is very important to keep the rapport with the policymakers. So not just policymakers, the administrators as well. So you can have a short term will be very popular, and the midterm as well. But the long term, you should include as well in your policy brief. But keep it, like I say, very short, very succinct, so that you don't elaborate too much or too long on these recommendations. So it has to be something that is easily repeated. Like, if we do this, then we get this. If we do this, we get this. I know a lot of researchers will feel like, oh, it is not as absolute as that, right? So that's why it is important to be specialized and not sensationalized. Be careful as well, because it is very easy for any lawmakers or anybody who wanted to jump in and use your policy brief as their tool to push a fact-based policy change, will sensationalize your policy brief. That can happen as well. So be careful. Yeah.
Right. I think that's a really great advice, and since we're kind of talking a little bit about the length of the policy brief, I'm not sure if I missed this, right? You said to keep it short and concise, right? Loaded but not overloaded. So do you kind of have a recommendation for how long a policy brief is? And if you can't, as researchers, presumably most of the people in the audience are researchers. We have so many things that we wanted to present, to tell the policymakers. Does it make sense to have, most of the meat within the policy brief, but then you attach like appendices, or things like that, to kind of like support the policy brief? Any thoughts on that, Puan Nurbaiyah?
I think appendices is good. Appendices is good for those who wanted further reference or other details. But keep it short in the sense that I wouldn't put it like some people said it's only 4 pages. Some people said it's between 15 to 20 pages. But I would say give it what it's worth. The most important paragraph is the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you put it clearly, that's why graphics layout, the page layout is very important so that it guides the eye of a lawmaker. They're all very busy people and they wanted to read the list. So it is very important for them to actually be able to scan. So this is the problem, this is the solution, and this is the situation right now, or this is the call for action. So which one? Make it very clear for them to skip or to read further. That's why the crafting of your paragraph is important. So I know we do not want to mislead by saying the simplest of the simplest or by dumbing it down. No, you are not dumbing it down. You are presenting facts as it is. So that's why it is very important to be very focused. Do not get distracted, because I am sure when you're doing your research, you have a whole lot of information, and they're all very critical and contributes to your findings. But when you are focused, then you can pinpoint exactly which part that needs change or that will, So of course, you need to look at number one, who is going to be affected and which area. So, yeah.
Okay. So the follow-up question from that is, must the recommendations be of actionable nature? Or can it be just giving like a recommended direction in the way forward, like a more generalized recommendation?
If there's no action, then it's not interesting. Why? Because people want results. If it's just a thought or an abstract, a concept here, it is not going to be very attractive. It is something that they can work on and for the people to have immediate benefit. So that is important. You see, the thing is, when a researcher come up with findings, not everything can be translated into a policy brief, because it depends on whether the area of research is for knowledge-based or how do I put this? Yeah, very specific of certain field, and it is more on the understanding of certain knowledge, but it is not. It will not immediately benefit the people. But somewhere along the line, if you are researching and if writing policy brief, if your KPI, look for an area that affects the people immediately.
Right.
So this is where you can expand and put it into a policy brief. Yeah.
Right. So I think if I understand what you're saying, Puan Nurbaiyah, you can be doing research in a broad topic, but then when you identify something that you want to convert to a policy brief, you need to have a very clear problem statement with a very clear solution for that specific thing, and it's usually pertaining to some kind of changes within the existing law or policies. Would dasar lakan it would be the right thing to say.
Yeah, it can be that, or you can also propose a new policy altogether.
Right. Okay, so we have an interesting question. I don't think you actually covered it. So we have a Dr. Ang Pei Su asking, do we need to project financial costs or implications in a brief? And I'm assuming this is in relation to the solution that is being proposed. And then Dr. Yong Adila is also asking, do we have to present the ROI? I don't know why my brain suddenly cannot remember what's ROI.
Return of investment. Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you. Ini orang
Right.
ini orang ekonomi ini. So do we need to present the ROI when it is difficult to calculate the ROI from the fundamental research, and the impact is more social and cannot necessarily be quantified?
I understand that. So it is very difficult to say that, oh, you need to promote equality in education and stuff like that. How do you put together an ROI and stuff? But in a situation like this, you can draw a sample. You need not say that if this policy change, this is certain amount that can be generated. These are the certain costs, and you cannot put that together because you do not know at what scale that this policy is going to be implemented. But what you can imagine is, or what you can give is a sample. For example, this is the community with this amount of people, and this is the cost, and this is it. Yes, you can do that. But I don't think a policy brief needs to be very exact in terms of cost, in terms of ROI. ROI meaning that return of investment in specific percentages and all that. Because a policy brief is largely looking at how findings how change can be made based on facts. And these facts comes from your research, the findings of your research. So it is a hypothetical situation again, but having said that, if you have the numbers, it's good, but do not overload the numbers here. Do not overload the numbers, and then it will take up important space for you to persuade people to make the change first. That's the numbers that you have. You can expand it during the presentation. So a policy brief is something that people can, if I may say, they can share over WhatsApp. It's as light as that, especially with the infographics. So if you can get good infographics to encapsulate everything that you said in a policy brief, that would be great. Yeah, the visual communication would be immense in putting forward, in getting the buy-in from the people. Not so much on ROI or the cost, because to me, unless the change is about cost,
okay,
then you have to put forward. Like otherwise, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, great points. So we have Dr. Nisha Govinder asking if you could recommend resources available to put together an excellent persuasive presentation. So I think this was in the context of, when you actually do meet get around to meeting the lawmaker in itself, right? And we did kind of talk about this, I think, Puan Nurbaiyah, in our last talk, right, about a year plus ago in talking about building rapport. And since we're on that topic about presentation, right, the persuasive, and I think you gave some good pointers, but how long should that meeting be, right? So since we're initiating that meeting with the lawmaker, right, we wanted to have a great opening and we want to close the meeting, and we want to give a persuasive presentation. So maybe can you elaborate a little bit more pointers on that part?
Okay. Presentation shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. Shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. If you can cap it at 10 minutes, that'll be good enough. Because you would want them to talk with you rather than to listen one way. You need a two-way conversation, two-way communication there. It is very important for you to build the rapport there and then, to get them their buy-in, to get them to listen to them, whether or not they understand what you're trying to say, whether or not they get what you're saying, what are their criticisms. Then from there on, because the idea is for you to improve on your policy brief, and not improve policy brief, you can push it further. What is it about your policy brief is sometimes policy briefs are living documents. Yeah, you can improve on it. So if there is something that they think that doesn't really gel with them, then maybe you have to look at it again, and whether this is in your policy brief or in the presentation that doesn't work out well, that's not well received and stuff like that. So their feedback is critical. Your presentation is to just engage with them, get them to understand and persuade them. The bigger part of persuasion happens after the presentation. And this is where you need to close. If they feel like, oh, I don't like this, they are not very keen on whatever that you have presented, and they feel like whatever you're saying is pretty much a done deal, it's being done, or they don't see any point of changing, then during your conversation with them, this is where you put forward why, and why. And then at the end of it, and the whole point is to listen, yeah. So you have to listen very carefully and not to debate. That's another thing. You do not debate with them because because you want to persuade them to be on board. So once that's done, ask them, close the deal, meaning that what is the next step forward? So this magic word, will get you the next appointment. There's another thing that I forgot to mention, to everyone. It's about listening to the parliament sitting. I know there's a lot of brouhaha happening, or not so very fantastic exchange happens in the parliament sitting, but this is where you can see how a lawmaker pushes forward change. So how is it they debate? Which area, which policy? And this, by understanding how they work at Parliament, it's the same with State Assembly, you will be able to put together a very good policy brief. So, and not just that, you can even respond to certain policies that's being debated, and how your fact or your findings from your research can actually help make this policy or this current debate better based on your findings. Yeah.
That's almost like providing live input, right, into the policy debate itself. Is almost seems so. It'll be great if your research is timely in that manner, right? That it just so happens that it happens to be the parliamentary debate of the day, if you will. So I think that's a great suggestion, Puan Nurbaiyah. And if you can think of any, I don't know, resources for developing the excellent persuasive presentation, maybe,
okay.
You can type it in there, or if you want to elaborate further, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just add a little bit on that.
Yep.
Actually, if you would like to look at how policy briefs are written, you can check out think tanks policy briefs. All think tanks actually write policy briefs, and sometimes they write about 4 or 5, depending on the area of their expertise. So check out their websites, and you can look at how they wrote their policy briefs. And because think tanks are one of the actors in policy change, so their writings are very persuasive and very, again, I have to say this as well. Some think tanks will write very elaborate policy briefs, but it depends on the grant as well they receive, how they receive the grant, and how what you call this, the contributor, the donor, would want the policy brief to be, or the research to be presented. So some policy briefs are really brief, and some policy briefs can be very elaborate. But have a look at that, and these are one of the best ways of writing, actually.
Great. I think you sort of answered the question that Dr. Nur Aisha has. She was asking if you could show one example of a good persuasive policy brief that has been realized into action successfully. I think now we're coming, to talk about impact of research, right? Not just, outputs, right? But what is impact? And I think that part of, writing that actionable policy brief and having it, being realized whether it resulted in some concrete results is something that, researchers are looking at, increasingly. I don't know, are you able to think of one off the top of your head, like an example of a good policy brief? And, yeah, I'll stop it at there first.
Okay. When you write a policy brief, it is not an overnight change. It will take months, weeks, months, not even weeks. Yeah, it will take months and years. Yeah, for something to happen. When I was at Ideas, we were working on political financing. This is political financing is making it transparent for corporations or people who wants to donate to political parties for campaigning and stuff like that. So making it transparent and making it legal is important because it cuts down on corruption. Yeah. And this is something that Ideas as a democracy supporter, I would say, something that pushes the agenda of democracy, has been working very hard on. They hold talks, what do you call this, yeah? Brainstorming sessions, meeting with the youth wings or political parties to talk about this. And when I came in, they were already working on it for 2 years. But now it is something that is being talked about. Yeah, and it was already being debated in the parliament as well. So this is something that you have to look at how something that you believe in and push through and advocate. I don't like to use the word advocate, but this advocacy will take a long time for it to happen. So I think if there's a lot of if you are into environment as well, it will take a long time for anyone. One of the things, that is so apparent, but nobody believes it for years and years and decades actually, is climate change. Once upon a time, it was a hoax. Everybody said it was a hoax, and people believed it. I mean, nobody would want to believe that it is happening. And even the previous U.S. President discarded, so it is not easy to push for change. So you have to be persistent. You have to persevere. So the one thing that I'd like to mention as well is when do you draw a line as a researcher with writing a policy brief and suddenly becoming an activist? So be careful. It is easy to slide into, and you do not know what's happening to you because you're very passionate about the issues or the subject. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong of becoming an activist. It is just be aware that the deeper that you go into pushing for your policy paper to be accepted, then you are already putting one foot into activism. And there's nothing wrong in that. It's just that be careful whether this is allowed by your institution or not. Yeah.
This is a really great point, right? I think researchers in general, we try to be impartial in that sense, right? We do our work, and we let our data and work speak for itself. But as you said, right, when you are advocating for certain change, based on our work, it's kind of like, moving into activism. So I don't know that, this sounds like a topic, entirely different topic for another day, but I think that's something, food for thought, for everyone. And I think that those are some really great points. And I think when you mention ideas about political financing is interesting. I never thought about this, but I've actually heard political financing discussion being had in a BFM not too long ago whilst I was driving in my car. So clearly I'm a recipient, if you will, getting aware, right, of some of these things that's being pushed. But I think you make a great point, Puan Nurbaiyah. This kind of changes or impact from a policy brief, does not happen overnight at all, right? It's something that, it needs to gather momentum, if you will, right? There's a greater awareness being built around the issue. And I think that's where, when hopefully, the awareness is there and there's political will, hopefully things will happen. Would that be right to say that, Puan Nurbaiyah?
Yeah, because I met how do I put this, an activist, yeah, an NGO who was working on the Orang Asli children's education. So it is not easy. It takes time, not easy. It takes time for change to happen. Number one, it takes time for change to be internalized. Something as simple as washing your hands. This is, if it's not in the culture, to inculcate that to become a culture, it will take years and years and years. So if you're writing a policy brief, think about how the change will need time to simmer and to be absorbed into the very heart of the people that will benefit this. So you need a big heart. Big heart.
Big heart.
So yeah, you need a big heart to push for change. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Puan Nurbaiyah. We have come to the end of our time, but I think you've given that important recipe, right? That when for researchers, right, in thinking about writing this policy brief, we're seeing it as a tool of change, but change is not really going to come overnight. So hopefully, with the tips that Puan Nurbaiyah has shared, right, I hope that our audience here will be able to take to heart and look at the policy brief if you're drafting one, or be thinking about pieces of your research work that can actually be converted into policy briefs that will ultimately get into the hands of our lawmakers. And I wish everybody here a productive journey going down this route of developing your policy brief. And thank you so much, Puan Nurbaiyah, for coming in today, for sharing your insights again.
Thank you, Amy. I'd like to part with this, yeah. How do you want to design your policy brief, or how do you want to write your policy brief? It's hard. I will not say that's a shortcut to it, but think about this, yeah. How would you talk to a child? It should be as simple as that. If a child can repeat what you say, then you're very successful in your writing.
Wow, that's some deep thoughts there. Thank you so much, Puan Nurbaiyah. And thank you everybody for spending your time this afternoon with us. I wish you all the best, and keep in touch with us as we will have some more exciting programs from COASTAR later on. So until then, take care everybody, stay safe, and I'll catch you all soon. Thanks so much again, Puan Nurbaiyah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye everybody.